So we are seeing the great role played by reason among the lower triple mind, the pygmy thought, rash intelligence, and reason. And reason can be very high, can climb up to great heights also. Thus vindicated, crowned, the grand new thought, that is reason, grand new thought, explained the world and mastered all its laws. Vindicated, crowned, new thought, explained the world and mastered its laws. Well, this is what reason thinks. But that need not be necessarily the whole thing also. This is what reason thinks. That it has explained the world, it has mastered the laws. But actually there are things far beyond reason, and reason is not aware of them. Touched the dumb roots, woke veiled tremendous power. This is a fact, of course. Woke veiled tremendous power. See, to bring out energy from an atom, to create an atom bomb is the pure work of reason, woke very tremendous power. That is what is locked in matter, and it has come up out of that thing. Reason's role is there. It bound to service the unconscious jinn. So those creatures, spirits who work there, it has put them into her service. That sleep mused in matters ignorant. That sleep mused, that means those jinns who sleep unused in matters ignorant trance. So they have now woken up and they are working. So basically what it means that all the powers of matter which have come up due to reason, they are in fact the powers of the spirits. Survey the unconscious jinn that sleep unused in matters ignorant trance. So these are the jinns actually who are working out all these things, whether it is an atom bomb or it is an internet or whatever you call it, as if they are kind of jinns who are working for all these things. Even robots which are being created now, they are the jinns in fact. All was precise, that is the nature of reason, precise, rigid, indubitable. You cannot doubt at all, you see. You cannot question it. You cannot debate at all about that thing. So that is what precise means. But when on matters rock of ages based, a whole stood up, firm and clear-cut and safe, all staggered back into a sea of doubt. Well, reason I have been thinking that has explained everything, but when on matters rock of ages based, a whole stood up, firm and clear-cut and safe, staggered back. Reason staggers. Reason fails to understand what it is. In fact, reason has created wonderful things, but then it is itself puzzled how this has happened, how it can happen at all, see, how it can happen at all. This solid scheme, sea of doubt, this is what I was telling you last time, Descartes' skepticism, Cartesian skepticism, that everything finally becomes doubt. I doubt, till you start doubting the doubt itself, you see. And then you say, no, because I exist, therefore I am, see. Cogito ergo sum, see. I think, therefore I am, you see. The other example which I had given you last time was, because I exhale carbon dioxide, therefore I breathe. See. The solids came, melted in endless flux. The entire scheme of matter, worked out by reason, ultimately becomes mobile, becomes unsteady. It doesn't have that fixity at all or that thing. Because today's ideas, your understanding of matter will not be the same as tomorrow's, and will keep on constantly changing all the while, you see. The solids came melted in endless flux. She had met the formless power, inventor of form. She, reason. She had met the formless power. Now, beyond reason, beyond mind, there is a power which has no form, and it is that power who actually creates forms. The formless power is the one who creates form, but how? To the faculty of mind. To the faculty of mind. And it is reason now who is meeting that power who invents forms. Beyond reason, there is the faculty of mind which creates form, invents form. And reason is meeting that power now. Suddenly, she stumbled upon things unseen. She, of course, stands for again reason. Stumbled upon things unseen. A lightning from the undiscovered truth started her eyes with its perplexing glare. So suddenly kind of a flash is there, and reason then starts wondering what it is, that it never saw that kind of a thing. But then it has the power, it has the capacity, it has the kind of mechanism by which what is coming as a flash of truth it can catch and seize and exploit. Lightning from the undiscovered truth startled her eyes with its perplexing glare and dug a gulf between the real and known. So that gulf, that means the truth is telling, all right, you have found something, but that is not the real thing at all. That is not the real thing. That lightning from the undiscovered truth is telling her, you have discovered something, but that is not the real thing. That is only a known thing to you. Behind the known, there is so much of unknown, and you have no idea of that unknown at all, you see. Till all her knowledge seemed an ignorance. Her of reason. Reason's all knowledge looks therefore an ignorance, because she cannot understand that thing. The gulf between the real and the known is such that she feels that as if everything is a play of ignorance finally. In other words, all the formulations made by reason are the product of ignorance. I capital are the products of ignorance. Once more, the world was made a wonder web, a magic process in a magical space. Because it seems all ignorance, therefore it looks like a wonder. It looks like magic. How it has happened? How it can happen at all? An unintelligible miracles, depths whose source is lost in the ineffable. Unintelligible miracle. The miracle is coming from the ineffable, but you have no access to that ineffable at all, you see. You have no access to that. Whose source is lost in the ineffable. That miracle source is actually in the ineffable. Why it is a miracle? Because for mind, for reason, it cannot argue out, it cannot logicize the whole sequence. How it has happened, it cannot tell. You take this and do that, and something else happens. How it has happened, how that you don't know at all. You see. Whose source is lost in the ineffable. Once more, we face the blank unknowable, because it is all ignorance now. So reason is trying to understand, is doubting, and ultimately what is the aim, what is the goal, what is the final result? That everything is unknowable. Unknowable means it cannot be known at all. It is impenetrable. Reason's faculty is incapable of going into the knowledge of those things at all. It becomes, therefore it becomes unknowable. Unknowable. I cannot know at all, you see. Now this is of course a different knowable than the supreme unknowable. The supreme unknowable, the absolute is unknowable. The absolute is unknowable because the possibilities of the absolute have not come into manifestation. What has not come into manifestation is therefore unknowable. But they are present in the absolute. So that unknowable is a supreme unknowable, whereas this is something helpless unknowable. I can't help it unknowing it all. Therefore, once more we face the blank unknowable in a crash of values, in a huge doom crack, in the sputter and scatter of a breaking world. She lost a clear, conserved, constructed world. So she had made a very beautiful palace, a house of cards, or a castle in the sands, and ultimately find that it has gone completely collapsed. A tide comes, a wave comes, and washes away the castle on the beach completely. You see, what it happens. She lost a clear, conserved, constructed world. Now, this is a deliberate alliteration. See. Clear, conserved, constructed world. She lost her clear. I am. Conserved, I am. Construct, I am. World, I am. All the five I ams, you see. She lost her clear, conserved, constructed. She was holding it, preserving it, trying to hold it on, but then it gets lost. A quantum dance remains, a sprawl of charm. Quantum dance remains, a sprawl of charm. Is of course the reference to the quantum mechanical idea that everything is governed by chance. Governed by chance. Quantum dance, you jump from one place by chance, you see. Sprawl of chance. Now, the probabilistic interpretation of physical laws is something which is, for the reason, has become unknowable. You have a probabilistic law because you don't know things. It has become unknowable. There is something unknowable, and you are making a virtue of your knowledge by calling it uncertainty, by calling it probability, and things like that. You see, to some extent it does work, but then that is not the real truth of it. It is not real truth. Even today, people are arguing, disputing, experimenting, carrying out elaborate experiments, whether electron is a particle or a wave. You see, it goes on like that. Whether light is a wave or is a particle, corpuscle, people keep on arguing all that. It cannot be resolved at all. It cannot be resolved at all. But people have forgotten one thing, that the very basis on which you have constructed your theory cannot but lead to a wave. The theory is a wave theory. The quantum equation is essentially a wave equation, and that equation, that wave equation, you are using for a particle. So, so that is the dilemma. You have got a particle, a grain of sand, and for describing a grain of sand, you are using a wave theory. So, what the wave theory will give? It will give only a wave for a particle. So that duality cannot be resolved. Now that is the real difficulty with the formulation of quantum equation. The second degree differential equation of quantum mechanics is basically a wave equation. So you are trapped in your own description, and then you are making a virtue whether it is a particle or a wave. You see, particle. So that is charm. And energy is stupendous, stripping world. Energy is stupendous, stripping world. Ultimately, what happens? Even a particle disappears, and what remains there is only energy. The substratum is not matter but energy. Then finally, a ceaseless motion in the unbounded void, invented form without a thought or aim. Because it is chance, therefore, without aim, without thought, aim. Necessity and cause were shapeless goals. Necessity and cause, they make deterministic laws. Whereas probability, chance will make uncertainty laws, probabilistic laws. They are not deterministic laws. Matter was an incident in being's flow because energy. So it is a kind of thing. Means there is no real reality of matter at all. There is no substantiality of matter, but law, but a clockwork habit of blindfold. Keep on repeating mechanically. That is what the force is doing, and that is what you call law. That is what you call. See, what it means is that if matter is governed by certain laws of this kind. But the laws can be changed. The habit of matter is to follow a certain law. But the habits can be changed. In other words, the laws can be changed. The habits can be changed, you see, like that, you see. The rhythms can be changed. Ideals, ethics, systems had no base and soon collapsed or without sanction lived. Now he is making from the quantum mechanics, he is coming to philosophical ideal, philosophical formula. The entire philosophy which is based on quantum understanding is now getting questioned here, you see. The question here. Ideals, ethics, systems had no base and soon collapsed or without sanction lived, all grew a chaos, a hue and clash and strife, all grew a chaos because of reason. It has now made the unknowable, blank unknowable, and therefore it is all a chaos now. See, it is not able to understand its own things, what it has made. You are coming to a kind of a deadlock. You are facing a wall. You are not able to go beyond that thing at all, and therefore all grows a chaos, a clash and strife. You see, ideas, warring and fears leaped upon life. Naturally, ideas, all kinds of isms are there. Every kind of theory is made as the principle of life. Human rights, freedom of expression, these are ideas. They are not realities at all. Freedom of expression, freedom of individuality, they are ideas actually. They are not real things. The real idea, the real freedom comes when you have discovered your inner being and you are going by your inner being, not by mental formulation. You formulate a certain theory and then you say that freedom of expression is my right. But then the freedom of expression also means that there has to be responsibility. Freedom accompanies with responsibility. That you ignore and you only go by freedom, freedom of expression. Liberty also means that you are bound by certain social laws. It's not anarchy, it's not thing. You are bound by certain social laws also. In fact, that is the kind of a synthesis, a kind of an integration, a kind of formulation of the Indian society in those days, that your dharma, your job, your purpose here is to do your duty. Duty. Duty is the most important thing first. Perform your duty and then automatically other things will follow. So that is the entire basis of Indian society on which it was founded. Duty, dharma. Dharma means duty in that sense, you see, dharma. So you follow your dharma, your conduct of behavior. Don't go by other laws at all. Your inner dharma, that is the most important thing. And then automatically everything will get resolved. So each person, each individual has to follow a certain kind of a social conduct law. So it had a certain importance, certain significance. It cannot be, of course, made rigid and formulated in a crude manner, but then the inner freedom is also there. See, in a certain sense, dharma or duty to the family is more important than love for the family. Than love for the family. It is not love by which the family is taught. Each one has a certain kind of an obligation, a performance to do, a duty to carry out. It is that duty which will bind everybody as members of the family, and then it is that way that the family will live harmoniously, because each one is now is following his dharma properly. Dharma means the way of looking at certain things, svabhava as we call it. So dharma is the basis in that sense of the Indian society, whereas liberty, freedom of expression, see, these are not very high ideals in that sense. You see, freedom of expression, yes, of course, but freedom for what? Not for your egoistic ideas. The freedom is for your soul, for the expression of your soul quality, and that freedom nobody can snatch. That freedom nobody can snatch at all, you see. Nobody can snatch that freedom, you see. But then, as far as society is concerned, you have a certain obligation, you have a certain duty to perform for each and everybody. That hardly anybody does nowadays, you see. See, even in the modern society, I mean, it is so much of disintegration. See the plight of old aged people, absolutely helpless. They may have money, but then they cannot really live at all. There is no, you need some kind of physical support, you need some kind of psychological support. That is completely lacking for the old people at all. Even if you put them in old houses, in dormitories or in ashrams or all that thing, still the problem is that thing. Because the family has not kind of united to take care of every aspect of life. From the child to the middle age, from the grown up people, from the aged people, from the ill people, how do you take care of all that thing? That is a part of dharma. That is how the society is maintained, you see. That is completely absent in the modern society. And therefore you have all these problems, you see here. Ideas, worrying and fears lived upon life, a hard compression held down anarchy, and liberty was only a phantom's name. Where is liberty really? Where is liberty really? Where is liberty? Fraternity, liberty, brotherhood, where is all that? You see, the creation and destruction was in arms on the bosom of a torn and quaking earth, and reeled into a world of Kali's dance. So it is the naked dance of Kali because of that, you see. Because everything is now kind of in conflict constantly. Kali's dance. All reeled into a world of Kali, all reeled. Of course, it is a spontaneous, all reeled into talking a world. I am of Ka, I am this dance, I am. All reeled into a world of Kali's dance. Now, Kali's dance. In no time, in the shortest period possible, when there was the German invasion, France completely collapsed. Within months, France collapsed on the Second World War. And then the mother says, it was the dance of Kali, and then I controlled Kali at that time. Kali's dance. That is what it means. Second World War beginning, the collapse of Paris shall be destroyed. That is how she was dancing. Paris shall be destroyed. Paris shall be destroyed. That was the shout of Kali at that time, you see. And it had to be arrested. And when it started happening, then it was the intervention. She had to intervene at that point of time. It cannot happen. It cannot go like that. Kali's dance. Actually, there is a letter on Sri Aurobindo about this one. In 1948, he writes, all reaching in a clash and confusion, became a world of Kali's dance. A world of Kali. Clash and confusion in a world of Kali's dance. That is exactly what happened. Of course, you have to say that it had to be in a certain sense because the French society was a very corrupt society at that time of time. And then naturally all these hostile forces will take capital on that, and Hitler had absolutely no difficulty running over Paris and conquering it straight away like that, you see. And then he says Kali's dance at that time. All confusion and clash. Now, all rail into a world, all rail. That spontaneity brings a tremendous force into the line. Thus tumble, sinking, sprawling in the void, because it's all now void, sprawling in the void, clutching for props, a soil on which to stand. You are trying to hold something, you are going to sing, you are going to hold something. She only saw a thin atomic. She, of course, reason. She saw only a thin atomic particulate vast, particulate. The rare points mass substratum of the universe. What is atomic mass? Vast. It is the rarest points mass substratum universe. Rare point in the army, the rare point at the back of the whole army. It is a substratum. Means in the scheme of things, this material creation, atomic city, is the last spare part on which flows a solid world phenomenal phase. So naturally, that phenomenal phase will also collapse when that is gone. Alone, a process of events was there, and nature's plastic and protein change. Nature's plastic and protein change. Protein constantly changing. Plastic multiple, completely you see, change. And strong by death to slay or to create. Now this is a tremendous thing. Strong by death to slay or to create. The raven invisible atoms of the potent fold. Raven invisible atoms of the potent fold. One of the most powerful lines in Savitri. The raven invisible atoms omnipotent fold. The raven invisible atoms omnipotent fold. What a line. And you see, the beauty of this line is the rave is an am. Now all the other 4 feet are anapis. Anapis. So there are 14 syllables in this line. The raven invisible atoms omnipotent one. The V alliteration is very powerful here. It is a mantric line. It is a mantric. Raven, split, fissured, broken, smashed. Smashed. I mean, when you smash the atom, then what happens? You see a force budding out. Now it is the smashing of atom, the atomic energy which is being released, which is described in this particular line. The raven invisible atoms omnipotent food. Wonderful, most remarkable line in Savitri, you see. Actually, strong by death to slay or to create. That is what the atom will do. When the energy is released, it will slay by death. But at the same time, to create. In fact, it is a miracle that from the fire of World War II, from the burning fire of World War II, what has come out is a totally new civilization. The civilization which is there after World War II, after 1945, is altogether of a different kind than what was there earlier previously. So from the atomic fire which was there, the omnipotent force which got released, it has created a new civilization altogether. Came space travel, came internet, came semiconductors, all these great advances came so rapidly after this first and second World War. 45, 47, the invention of transistor was there. In 1947, the transistor was invented, and that was the beginning of the entire change. You see, all these things what we are saying is due to that single invention in 1947. It was done in Bell Telephone Laboratory invention, and 3 people got Nobel Prize for that. Shockley, Bardeen and Brattain, they got Nobel Prize for that thing. It was made by that time purely based on germanium, the transistor. The first transistor was based on germanium. Then of course, germanium cannot be used easily at high temperatures. So silicon was found, and the entire integral technology, computer technology is now based on silicon. Then we have got Silicon Valley, you see, they call it Silicon Valley. based on that thing, you see, completely Silicon Valley. So really it is a creation. By death to slay, it has slayed the past and it has brought out a new civilization altogether. From the burning fire of World War II, what has sprung up is a new civilization. As if a phoenix is rising from its own fire and coming up and soaring in the sky. The phoenix is, see, that is what happens. Phoenix takes his own birth from his own fire and comes up like that, you see. The raven, invisible atoms, omnipotent foes. As I said, rave, I am one invisible atoms, omnipotent foes. So four anapaests are there, you see. One of the most remarkable lines from a poetic point of view, from this point of view of expansion in Savitri, you see. Actually, let me give a little history about that thing. In 1940, around 1940, Shivandu had made a note. Much before the atom was split on the screen, much before the atomic bomb was created. 1940 he is writing, around 1940. Now there is the disintegration of atom and the power that is released at it. The disintegration of atom and the power that is released at it. Then he says, humanity must step in. He is writing in 1940. Humanity must step in. Otherwise, they can blow up humanity out of human existence. He is writing in 1940. They can blow up humanity out of existence. So you see, although the freedom is there, but then there is a responsibility also. Do you want to blow up the universe? You see, there is a responsibility also, freedom. You see. So if you have got the Statue of Liberty on the east coast of America, you ought to have a statue of responsibility on the west coast of America. You ought to have, maybe in San Francisco, you build up a statue of responsibility, but that statue is not there at all, you see. See, the Statue of Liberty was donated by France, and therefore you got the Statue of Liberty there in New York. Now somebody has to come forward, maybe France should come forward and build up a statue of responsibility on the west coast, you see. That is not there at all. In 1940, Shivandu is writing already about that thing. In fact, his sonnet, written on 25th September 1939, much before the World War II started. World War started on 3rd September. 3rd September. He writes on 25th September 1939 about, in his sonnet he writes, a scientist played with atom and blew out the universe before God had time to shout. He writes, before God had time to shout, the scientist played with an atom and blew out. He writes on 25 September 1939, a dream of surreal science. That is the sonnet in 1939. Dream of surreal science. He writes that thing already in 30. He is already aware of it, about the dangerous, the omnipotent force of the invisible, even invisible atoms. He is already aware of it in 1939. How did he come to know of that? How did he come to know? He is sitting in a remote corner in Pondicherry in a cave, in his room there. He has absolutely no contact with the world and all that. And he already knows that the atom is going to smash and all that thing, you see. Now, my theory is, in those days, Arjuna, the English poet and philosopher, was Shivandu's disciple staying in the ashram. And Shivandu had very high opinion about Arjuna. Arjuna is the name given to by Shivandu to Chadwick, John Chadwick. His original name is John Chadwick. Shivandu had given him the name Arjuna, you see. And Arjuna was a very deep philosopher and a poet also, you see, poet. Some of his poems, Sri Aurobindo has praised very highly, Sri Aurobindo has praised him. Now, Arjuna being a Britisher, he used to get in those days the daily Manchester Guardian. Manchester Guardian. And naturally, Sri Aurobindo used to read that thing. I mean, Arjuna used to pass it on to Sri Aurobindo, and Sri Aurobindo used to go through the latest news in the Manchester Guardian, you see, Manchester Guardian. Now, in 1938, this is 25th September 1939. I am talking of 1938. A few months before that, Otto Hahn and Lise Meitner, the German scientists, Otto Hahn and Lise Meitner, in German scientists, they had carried out the fission of uranium-235 as an experiment. So they had taken uranium-235 and then with the help of the slow neutrons bombarded uranium-235 in the laboratory, and then they found that the atom is split into roughly two equal halves. The atom is split into two equal halves. So that is the first experiment on nuclear fission which was done by Otto Hahn and Lise Meitner in 1938, and that was published in a scientific journal. At that time, it was published in a scientific journal. Naturally, being such an important discovery of the fission of the atom, I mean, people at that time did not know the consequences, what it means, but that the atom can be fissioned and the energy can come out of it of great quantity, that itself made a big news in those days. And my feeling is that Manchester Guardian must have reported that finding of Otto Hahn and Lise Meitner in the journal. And possibly Sri Aurobindo has read it also, you see, because of that, you see. So that is the kind of a physical connection, I will say, he had with the fission experiment done in 1938. But of course, apart from that, he has the occult feeling, occult understanding of what is happening everywhere. His yogic power is there, which can understand. But yogic power is not sufficient unless it comes to a material level. And therefore, you have to combine both his yogic insight, yogic power, and the factual details of things. They have to be combined together. And that happened in his writing that sonnet. A scientist played with an atom and blew out the universe before God had time to shout. He is writing very clearly in 39, much before the atom bomb was made. So he saw that thing, and this line, the riven invisible atoms, omnipotent force, this line is written around 1942. But the sonnet tells you already the power and the potentiality of the riven atom, or the broken atom, or the fission atom, you see. Actually, so the first discovery is 1938, or the fission of uranium-235. Then you have Sri Aurobindo's sonnet, then you have got this line from Savitri, the riven invisible atoms, omnipotent force. Now, when the potential of this development was seen at that time, when the World War broke out on 3rd September 1939, at that time, there was a conference of physicists in England. All the top physicists were attending the conference. Niels Bohr from Copenhagen at that time, he knew the kind of experiments which were being done by the German scientists. Because of scientists, they had got a kind of connection, and at the time it was not such a serious matter. So they kind of exchanged notes at that time. So Niels Bohr knew about that thing, And then he went to England for the conference, and immediately after that conference was over, instead of coming back, he went to America, Niels Bohr. And at that time, he told the American physicist, and also to some extent, he told it to Einstein, because Einstein was already in Germany at that time, in USA at that time, in Princeton. He was already there. He told about it. Now, when this piece of information was brought by Niels Bohr to the physicists in America, within 1 week, they set up an experiment to find out whether the findings are correct or not. Whether the nuclear fission like that can occur or not, they set up an experiment, and within 1 week they found that what is reported is true. What is reported is true. In 1939, you see, Niels Bohr. So it is Niels Bohr who actually took the news to America. And then when the World War broke out at that time, they immediately saw the great danger ahead of it, you see. And then at that time, Einstein wrote a letter to the president at that time, Roosevelt, saying that this is a very serious matter and we must do something. And therefore the atomic project was kind of initiated in America at that time, in 1939 itself. And the first sustained nuclear fission in the laboratory was carried out by Fermi. Fermi, who was an Italian scientist, but because he had a Jewish wife, he had to go away and settle in America at that time. So he settled away in America at that time. Fermi set up in Chicago a graphite pile reactors. Slow neutrons were produced and nuclear fission was, the first nuclear reaction, controlled nuclear reaction was done by Fermi, and it was demonstrated on 2nd December 1942, 3:15 p.m. 3:15 p.m. it was demonstrated that it is possible to sustain a nuclear reaction like that in the laboratory. So that was the first atomic pile which was discovered. 2nd December 1942 is important. 2nd December is our school's program. See, mother started a school here in 1943. 2nd December itself, you see. So that is quite significant in a certain sense, you see. If you want to see the occult connection between these, you see. So the atomic pile was built up and demonstrated the successful thing. And when the effort became very serious at that time, then they established the Manhattan Project with Leslie Groves as in charge of that project. And then it is he who organized the entire Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. And on 15th July 1945, the first atomic bomb was exploded in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And at the time, Oppenheimer says it looked like 1,000 suns burning in the sky. You see, that is, he quotes the verses from the Gita. Sahastra Surya, 1,000 suns are burning. He quotes, Oppenheimer is quoting the Sanskrit verses at that time, you see, there, you see, in 1942. So that was the first demonstration, experimental demonstration of the nuclear bomb in the laboratory. On 16th July 1945, within months, they prepared 2 bombs, one based on uranium and one based on plutonium. And the first bomb was exploded on 6th August 1945, 8:30 local time on Nagasaki, and then Hiroshima first, and on 9th August, Nagasaki, you see. So, see, that is the entire sequence of the atomic development in that small period like that. And of course, Shivendra was watching here. And here is acting the raven, invisible atoms, omnipotent force. Because death to slay, to create, well, in a certain sense, how he allows in an awkward way that to proceed. His yogic power, he allowed that to go further, because it has to create something also. The atomic explosion is dangerous, but then the yogi can hold it and make a creative aspect of that experiment altogether, you see. The whole new civilization has come up from that. In fact, you cannot imagine what was before 1945 and what has happened after 1945, you see. We cannot imagine that thing. The enormous change. And it can happen only in the presence of an avatar who has got the control, full mastery over things like that. You see. The raven, invisible atoms, omnipotent force. And it is by this time, the first part of Savitri, all those 12,000 lines of Savitri were more or less complete. After 45, then he started writing the second part of Savitri, you see, second part of the new creation, all those things, Savitri's work, conquering death, omnipotent force, conquering death, that is Savitri. It started happening after 1945, you see. The raven, invisible atoms, omnipotent. One chance remained that here might be a power to liberate man from the old inadequate means. Yes, it was really power, and leave him sovereign of the earthly scene. One chance was there, and really man has created to a certain extent for reason that might grasp the original force. There is a possibility of reason may understand what the original force wants her to do. There is a possibility of that. To drive her car upon the roads of time, reason must be allowed full play like that if she is in contact with the original force like that, you see. Original force. By the way, scientists played with the atom and blew at the atom. It says, we have a similar description about this atom, the raven invisible atom force, 123.45. 123.45. Mission shall live to slay my enemy kin, the first tremendous cosmic energy. 123.45. The first tremendous cosmic energy. Mission shall live to slay my enemy kin, fissured invisible. 123.46. Fissured invisible, he says that. Slay enemies with a look or thought. With a look or thought, he says, I can slay enemies with a look or thought. 123.53. So we got three references. 123.45. The next line, 123.46 and 123.53. Now, these are from Savitri's Yoga, the book of Yoga, Savitri's book of Yoga, these lines, Canto 3, basically, the triple soul force, Canto 4, the triple soul force. Now, the triple soul force, the second soul force, she is the power. I am charged to do God's mighty work. She says that. And Savitri tells that, yes, you have power, but you don't have wisdom. You don't have wisdom. Savitri tells, I will come back and give you wisdom. One day I will come back and I will give you wisdom. Now this is exactly what reason is doing. Reason has a certain power, but no wisdom. No wisdom. It can produce such wonderful thing like that. Reason. It is purely a discovery on the basis of reason. Nuclear fission is the discovery based on who else could have done that thing at all. In the entire history of mankind, reason had never risen to such a height that it can bring out the atomic power into a manifest reality. Yeah. You may play with sand grains, things like that here and there, or not, but to see that the atom can explode and bring out energy, it is the power of reason which has done that thing. For reason then might grasp the original force to drive her car upon the roads of time, All that. Well, actually, let me see if I got something else here. The book of yoga, yeah, actually connected with this line, the Raven invisible atoms omnipotent force. Sri Aurobindo has written a narrative poem on 15th November 1933. 15th November 1933. And the title of the poem is The Life Heavens. The Life Heavens. And there you have got wonderful stanza, absolutely mantric. Most wonderful stanza, absolutely mantric. I'm sticking to voiceless supreme delight. I'm sticking to voiceless supreme delight. Life that made eternal with closed breath. Life that made eternal with closed breath. An unwalled mind dissolved in the infinite. Unwalled mind dissolved in the infinite. Force one with unimaginable rest. Force one with unimaginable rest. He is writing now force with unimaginable rest. In 1933, much before 1938, when the nuclear fission was done, he has already written that kind of a thing. Means that yogic vision is there already with him about the possibility of matter exploding like that. In 1933, 15th November 1933, force one with unimaginable rest. You cannot imagine, says Allah. It is standing there till you see. So you already have that sort of a vision there, you see, about the atomic force, atomic energy which can be released. In 1933 writing, then of course 1938 and the Raven invisible atoms omnipotent force and what we have got in Savitri's Yoga. Savitri's Yoga came in 1946, 47 rather, you see, what we have written. The reason, the arrogant Asura is telling her, I have built up all this thing, I will do this, I will crack the current. This is what he says, this is that. You see. Now, in a poem by Shelley, it is an ode, which is an elegy. It is a poem written by Shelley about the death of Keats. Keats died at a very early age, and Keats and Shelley were intimate friends of that thing. And in remembrance of Keats, Shelley wrote a long, huge, big poem, Adonis. The title of the poem is Adonis, A-D-O-N-S. And there he has got a line. The intense atom glows a moment. Then is squandered in a most cold repose. An intense atom glows a moment. It glows. Yeah, the atom is smashed. It glows for a moment, and ultimately what happens? It becomes cold space. Got it right? This is, of course, he is writing in the context of the death of his friend. An intense atom, that is Keats. He glows for a moment, shines up, comes up, you see, and then lies in cold repose, dies in a cave, in a graveyard, you see, like that, you see. Quenched in a most cold repose. Now, the important phrase here is intense atom. Shelley has some kind of an intuition of all the other things. He is talking of an atom. And he is talking of an intense atom. This intense atom is, of course, Shelley, of course, Keats, but then the phrase intense atom is a physical phrase, and he is always seeing the possibility of the intense atom glowing. In glowing, you see, as early as that, he sees that. In other words, the poetic intuition is present there about the energy locked in atom. He says intense atom is a very important phrase, intense atom, you see, actually. And then, of course, Shelley in the same poem has a word which is very important. The word is the massy earth, solid mass, and speared skies are riven. He uses the word riven there, you see. He uses the word riven. The earth, which is a solid thing, and the sky, they are separated, riven apart like that, you see. So he uses the word riven there. And Sri Aurobindo has used here riven in a totally different manner altogether. The power is coming out here. Riven means broken, separated. Like that, you see. So the word riven is a very beautiful, strong word here in the whole line, you see. The massy earth and speared skies are riven. Well, I think enough of this to drive a car upon the roads of time. All then might serve the need of the thinking race. Yes, well, it is serving it has brought a lot of consumer goods to us, to the thinker race. It has brought off these bottles, these consumer goods for us. All the while you see like that, you see. An absolute state found, order absolute, to standardize perfection, cut all things. So that is the whole idea. Reason will try to analyze, keep compartments and organize all things. And standardize perfection, cut all things. In society, build a just exact machine. Well, our society is really a mechanical society that way. We are bound by a clock. We are doing that, you see. Then, science and reason, careless of the soul. What a pity. Because of reason has severed science and soul, you see. Soul and reason, they are. Could iron out a tranquil, uniform world, eonic seeking, glut with outward truth, and a single pattern thinking force on mind, infitting matters logic on spirit's dream. Matters logic on spirit's dream. That is what reason is all the while trying to do. Thinking matters dream. See, we have got mythologies, they have got the truths in the mythologies, but we dismiss them or we try to reason them out. Infitting matters logic on spirit dreams, a reasonable animal make of man. Reasonable animal make of man. Man is a reasoning animal. Man is a reasoning animal, but he is not a reasonable animal. He is not a reasonable animal. He is a reasoning animal, but he is not a reasonable. Therefore, he says, a reasonable animal man may become a reasonable fellow. May become a reasonable fellow. He is not a reasonable man today, you see. He is a reasoning creature already. And a symmetric fabric of his life. This would be nature speak on an obscure globe. This is the highest achievement of nature with reason alone. If you go only by reason, this will be the tallest achievement of man, that he becomes a reasonable, he might become a reasonable creature. The reasoning being might become a reasonable creature, you see. This would be nature speak on an obscure globe. The grand desert of the long ages toil. Really, I mean, if you think of that, starting from Plato's days of reason, pure reason, coming down to science and reason and the riven invisible atoms, omnipotent force, more than 2000 years have gone by. Reason has made all that things. It was the power of 300 BC of Plato, and in 1940 we have got the fission atom. Reason's progress like that. Grand result of the long ages toil. That is how reason has been toiling all the while. You see. Earth's evolution crowned her mission done. Earth's mission done. So might it be. He, the spirit, fell asleep. Well, this is what the reason could do it. But then, is that going to the end of it? and a symmetric fabric of his life, then science and reason, careless of the soul, could iron out tranquil uniform world. Will they be able to form a uniform world at all? Reason and science, not at all. That will not happen because of this thing. And therefore, this would be nature speak on obscure glow, earth's illusion. So might it be if the spirit fell asleep. Means if the spirit falls asleep, reason will be allowed to do what reason has to do and will bring out this kind of a perfection. But is spirit really asleep? Spirit is allowing reason to have her play. It does not mean that spirit is sleeping. Spirit would like the potentialities of reason to emerge out in the full extent, in the full manner, completely. They must come out. The potentialities of reason must come out. So might it be if the spirit fell asleep, man then might rest content and live in peace. That we are reason and we are happy and let it go on like that. Man might rest. Master of nature who wants her bound slave works. Master of nature, that is man, who wants her bound slave worked. Now, there is a little problem here in this line. This line, master of nature, amphibrach, who wants, I am, her bound, I am, slave worked, I am. That is way you can also scan it, master of nature, but that won't do. You see, you cannot have master of nature. That scansion will not be effective. The proper scansion is master of nature. See, in fact, you can even have a third kind of scanning. Master of nature who wants an apist. Even that would do. The correct scansion will be master of nature who wants her bound slave worked. That is the perfect scansion. Now, this wants, in the revised edition, it is once, O-N-C-E, once. Master of nature who wants her bound slave worked. He is the master of nature now. At one time, this master of nature had worked as her bond slave. Her bond slave. Now, how that once got changed to wants, of that I have no idea. But I think that correction sounds correct. The correction sounds appropriate. That it should not be wants, it should be wants. Master of nature who wants her bond slave work. He is the master of nature, but at one time he was working her bond slave. That sounds correct, you see. But the scansion wise, it remains the same. Master of nature who wants her bond slave work. The meter does not change with that, you see. The world's disorder hardening into law. So disorder has become the law now. If life's dire heart arose not in revolt, you see, life will not allow reason to tie her down to this, to that, to this rule, that rule, this compartmentalization. Life does not tolerate that kind of thing. If life's dire heart arose not in revolt, it is good that life is revolting against reason. It is good that life is revolting against reason. If God within could find no greater plan. So, if God is not able to find the plan, okay, let me try. That is what life is saying. Let me try, let me do something of that, you see. Maybe God is helpless as far as the reason is concerned, but life says, I am sorry, I don't accept this kind of compartmentalization, this kind of a constraint which is imposed on me by reason. I will not accept it. If life's dire heart arose not, so it is good that there is a kind of a counterpoint. Reason is doing certain wonderful thing, but then that kind of a mechanical perfection, geometrical perfection is not what life wants. It loses the entire charm of existence completely. See, completely. But many will say it a cosmic soul. You see, the spirit is not sleeping, and one of the messages is reason, another message is life. All the things are working here of the cosmic soul. The cosmic soul is allowing every kind of a faculty to come into operation and do things. But many we say, hey, the cosmic soul, a touch can alter the fixed front of pain. Because of that cosmic soul, his little touch can change completely this way or that way, in whatever you like. A sudden turn can come, a road appear, because that cosmic soul, if it can touch, the cosmic soul can touch, then a sudden turn can come, a road appear. Mean if you are in a kind of a deadlock, reason is not able to do certain things, too perfect, too geometrical, too cold, and life says, I am sorry, I don't like that thing. So the cosmic soul allows life to do certain things there. See, a sudden turn can come, a road appear, a greater mind may see a greater truth. Greater mind, this greater mind, more than what reason can do. Reason is only the part of the lower trinity. But then beyond that lower trinity, the pygmy thought, the harsh intelligence, reason, rash intelligence, stubborn with doubt, reason stubborn with doubt. Beyond that, there is a greater mind. The spiritual mind is there. The spiritual mind is there. And the spiritual mind can change certain things like that. Even beyond the spiritual mind is the divine mind itself. Beyond the divine mind is the supermind itself is there. And that can change completely everything, you see. A greater mind may see a greater change, but it cannot, this greater mind is not supermind at all. Because in the question of, in the context of supermind, there is no question of may see. It will see. It will see. So this greater mind is not supermind at all. It may be at the most a spiritual mind or mind to some extent, you see, the greater mind. A greater mind may see a greater truth, or we may find when all the rest has failed, hid in ourselves the key of perfect change. Within all the faculties of mind, thinking, using, they are completely failure. But then there is something seated deep within, that little soul is there, little ansha of the divine is there, a bit of the divine is present here, the psychic, the soul is there, and it can change something altogether, do it. Head in ourselves, the key of perfect change. So actually, the change can occur not by reason, not even by greater mind. Change cannot occur even by greater mind. The change, the real change can occur only by that little one who is seated within us. The psychic being, the divine soul who is there, it is he who can really bring about this change completely. It does not argue, it does not logicize things at all. Ascending from the soil, where creep our days are really creeping to the soil, ascending from the soil, where creep our days, Earth's consciousness may marry the sun. May marry the sun, because the cosmic soul, a touch, the touch of the cosmic soul can change everything. The touch of the cosmic soul can change everything. Our mortal life ride on the spirit's wing. Our finite thoughts commune with the infinite. So suddenly poetry has become different, you see. Happiness, joyous, lyrical, ascending from the soil where to creep our days. Earth's consciousness may marry with the sun, with a touch, may marry with the sun. Our mortal life ride on the spirit's wing. our finite thoughts commune with the infinite. So that is the summary of the section of the reason which is there. But then beyond reason we have got something here. In the bright kingdoms of the rising sun, bright kingdoms of the rising sun, beyond reason, now he is entering into bright, it's a paragraph, it's a breaking paragraph here. In the bright kingdoms of the rising sun of the spiritual mind, of the spiritual aspects of mind, the higher mind, the luminous mind, intuition, revelation, all those powers can come out. The spiritual post-human destinies, what a modern phrase is, the post-human destinies, kingdoms of the rising sun. So it is slowly coming up out of the ignorance, coming up like a shadow. All is a birth into a power of light. All here is deformed, God there is happy saved there in that real kingdom, happy saved. There means that kingdom. Here all is mixed and marred. There pure and whole. He is making the contrast here. Mean all your reason, etc., mixed and marred. There pure and whole. The great kingdom. Yet each is a passing step, a moment of it. You see, all those things might be there. You might even go to the higher world, higher mind, greater mind, but still it could be a moment's of space. Beyond that also there will be ranges and ranges of knowledge. Awake to a greater truth beyond her acts of reason. The mediatrix, I'm sorry, you can say, no, the mediatrix between the reasoning mind and the higher kingdoms, mediatrix. Away to greater truth beyond her. Her stands for mediatrix. Sat and saw her works and felt the marvel in them and the force, but knew the power behind the face of time. Who is this mediatrix? The one who is between the mind and the spiritual mind. She is the mediatrix. Her deep heart yearned towards great ideal things. So beyond mind will be the ideal mind. Beyond this mind, he is kind of introducing the ideal mind, and from the light looked out to wider light. A brilliant hedge drawn round her, narrowed her power. Faithful to her limited sphere, she toiled. She mediatrix, she toiled, but knew its highest, widest seeing was a half turn, its mightiest act a passage or a stage. For not by reason was creation made. Reason was the helper, reason is the bar. Reason was the helper, reason was the bar. And here got this rhetorical line. Not by reason was creation made. Not by reason can the truth be seen. It's a kind of a blow to reason. You cannot, truth cannot be seen by reason. Which through the veils of thought, truth which through the veils of thought, the screens of sense, hardly the spirit's vision can describe. The spirit's vision it cannot really understand at all. Hardly the spirit's vision can describe. Dim with the imperfections of its name. The little mind is tied to little things. The reason, etc., is the little mind tied to little things. The little mind, I am, is tied, I am, to a little thing. All I am, little thing. His sense is but the spirit's outward touch, half awakened in a world of dark, half awakened in a world of dark inconscience. Well, really, it's not a bad thing. You have come all the way from inconscience to half awakening. See? Half awakened, half waked. Well, I'm sorry, he says half waked. Half waked. This is a new phrase, waked. You see, he uses similar. Half waked in a world, waked is not normally used in English, but it is Shriman is using that thing, you see. Half baked in a world of dark inconscience, it feels out for its being and its form, like one left fumbling in ignorant night, in this small world of infant mind and sense. Small world of infant mind and sense. Well, this Trinity is after all a small mode, an infant mind, small, early things. Desire is a child heart's crying for bliss. It is crying for bliss. It is a child, you see. Our reason only a toy's artificer, a rule maker in a strange, stumbling game. It makes rules, but it keeps on changing. The rules keep on changing from time to time. They are not permanent at all, keeps on changing. But she, her dwarf aids, knew whose confident sign a bounded prospect took for her goal. The world she has made is an interim report. So the poet is telling you, well, reason has certainly done certain things, but it's an interim objective, interim report only. The world she has made, reason has made, is an interim report, that mediatrix, reason, of a traveler. Interim report of what? Whose? Of a traveler towards the half-found truth in things. Moving twixt nations and moving twixt nations and half-found truth. What is the half-found truth? That there is enormous power locked in the atom. That's a half-found truth. That is a half-found. There is an enormous power. That is a found truth. It's true also. For nothing is known while aught remains concealed. The truth is known only when all is seen. So that is necessity, attracted by the all, that is the one, attracted by the all, that is the one. Now the whole metaphysics is there. The multiplicity of creation, which is there in one, all is the one. You see, that is not known to reason. All is the one, that is not known to reason, you see. See, you have got all is one is all, and all is one. So, all is one is all. Yeah, that's right. Attracted with the all, that is the one. She yearned to the higher right than her. So, in reason, there is something there. She is yearning something. She is desiring something to happen. This hope. She yearned to a higher light than her. Hid by her cults and creeds, she has glimpsed God's face. True. Religion also. It has its own reasoning. It has seen God's face to some extent. You see God's face. She knows she has but found a form, a robe, but ever she hopes to see Him in her heart. Can she see Him in her heart? No, that is a separate thing, but that hope is there. And feel the body of His reality. Body of His reality. That is what reason wants to see it. It cannot see it's a different matter, but that urge is there even in reason. She hopes to see Him, feel the body of His reality. What a wonderful thing. Reason wants to see the body of reality altogether. Yet a mask is there and not a brow. Although sometimes two hidden eyes appear, to the mask two hidden eyes appear. You put a burqa and you got only two eyes looking to the to the burqa, you see. Although sometimes two hidden eyes appear, reason cannot tear out that glimmering mask. Reason impossible to remove mask. Her efforts only make it glimmer more. Glimmer more what? That mask becomes more glimmering. Its packets she ties up the indivisible. So, indivisible is there which cannot be divided. But she keeps on packeting, making small things. See, you have got a whole ocean of milk, but ultimately what comes to your house are packets. You see, do the sagara, you see, ocean of milk, you see. In packets she ties up invisible, finding her hands too small to hold vast truth, therefore she makes small. She breaks up knowledge into alien palm or pierces through cloud track for a vanished sun. So you have got cloud and they are trying to see the sun. She sees, not understanding what she has seen. Well, she sees but not understand. It is true. Science has seen certain things but not understood things. Through the locked visages of finite things, the varied aspects of infinity, one day the face must burn out through the mask. Well, this is the fact now, this is the situation, this is the whole context. But one day the face out of that mask must come out through the mask. Our ignorance is wisdom's chrysalis. Our ignorance is wisdom's chrysalis. It is a sheath, it is a covering, it is a protection. Ignorance is a protection of wisdom's chrysalis. Our error waits new knowledge on its way. Its darkness is a blackened knot of light. Its darkness is a blackened knot of light. What a phrase! Darkness, blackened knot of light. You see, what a phrase! You see, thought dances hand in hand with nation on the grey road that winds toward the sun. On the grey road that winds toward the sun. Even while her fingers fumble at the knots, well, which bind them to the strange companionship and to the moments of their married strife, sometimes break flashes of the enlightening fire. Flashes of the enlightening fire, they shine out sometimes, you see. Even now, great thoughts are here that walk alone. Suddenly something happens, you don't know where from it has come, and you understand then even now great thoughts are here that walk alone, and they have come with the infallible word that is mantra. Mantra, the power by which things can be realized, that is the infallible word, the mantra. And they have come with the mantra in an investiture of intuitive light that is sanctioned from the eyes of God. This mantra, this word is a sanction coming straight from God. Announcers of a distant truth, they flame, arriving from the rim of eternity. Arriving from the rim of eternity. A fire shall come out of the infinitude. A greater knowledge shall regard the world. What a triumph song now. A greater knowledge shall regard, will look at the world, see. A fire shall come out of the infinitude. A fire shall come out of the infinitude. A greater knowledge shall regard the world. Crossing out of some far omniscient on lustrous sea, from the still, wrapped alone, to live in the deep heart of self and things. What a sentence, what a beautiful sentence. Absolutely mantric, practical. A fire shall come out of the infinitude, a greater knowledge shall regard the world. Crossing out of some far omniscient on lustrous seas, from the still, wrapped alone, to living the deep heart of self and things. These pure mantric lines, absolutely powerful. At times this knowledge it shall bring to mind, its aim to life, to ignorance, is close. When that greater gnosis comes, ignorance will be no more there. Greater gnosis will come, ignorance will be no more there. Well, we have come to this point. This is a wonderful sentence. A fire shall come out of the infinitude, a greater gnosis shall regard the world. Crossing out some far omniscient on lustrous seas from the still, wrapped alone. Seas are still, wrapped, rapturous, happy, alone, to living the deep heart of self and thing. What a sentence. This sure mantra should be kept on reciting, singing that. I think we'll stop with that. We have to stop with that.